Today's reflection centers around a truth that is hard but necessary to face. We cannot wish the adversity of deception away, nor apply logic to situations that are at times downright diabolical and defy understanding. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a spiritual and practical reality. There are moments in this life when what stands before us cannot be reasoned with. Moments when the cloud of deception rolls in, quiet, deliberate, and without apology. And in those moments, the human mind instinctively reaches for logic, for explanation, for something that can be solved like a riddle. But deception does not speak the language of reason. It is a distortion, a shadow designed to twist the obvious into confusion. We cannot wish the adversity of deception away. We cannot fix it by rationalizing what was never meant to make sense. Today, deception isn't just carried on the wind anymore. It is engineered, amplified, and dressed up to look like truth. Family photos taken decades ago, quiet moments of our lives, suddenly shape-shifting, faces moving, voices speaking, black and white turning to color, as if the past itself was rewritten. But it was not real. This is the world we live in now, an age where technology can lie convincingly, where anyone can be made to appear where they never stood, say what they never said, and do what they never did, where truth can be manufactured and lies can wear familiar faces. And here's the deeper danger. Once deception spreads, even when it's proven false, people do not automatically return to the truth. More often than not, they believe the lie. Not because the lie is stronger, but because they are already aligned with its energy. They believe what suits their narrative. They believe what shields their illusion. They believe what mirrors what's living in their own frequency. Deception doesn't work just because it is clever. It works because, on some level, we are already deceived. It finds the cracks in what we want to believe, the places where emotion outweighs truth, where the will to have our way blinds us to what is real. It works because we keep feeding it, replaying the same thoughts, defending the same illusions, instead of asking what is actually true. And that is how deception grows. Not from its strength, but from our agreement with the parts of us that still cannot bear to see clearly. That is why clarity matters so much in times like these. Because when truth and falsehood both stand in front of a person, it is not the louder voice they follow. It is the voice they are aligned with. Deception doesn't need to prove anything because emotion and perception do the heavy lifting. Once a lie stirs a feeling, that feeling shapes how we see. And once our seeing is shaped, we call it truth. Think about how easily a headline can travel. You read a few words that shock you, and before you have even checked if it is true, the feeling has already written the story in your mind. Hours later, even if you learn the facts, the first emotion still feels more real. Most people do not realize that what they believe is not built on facts. It is built on how something made them feel. And when emotion becomes the builder, deception hardly has to lift a finger. All it has to do is give that feeling a story to live in. We are our own undoing when we indulge our emotions and leave our beliefs unchecked. Because once emotion takes the driver's seat, perception follows, and together they can make a lie feel like truth. Deception doesn't arrive with a fight. It arrives with confidence, knowing we have already built the stage for its performance. It grows not through force, but through our cooperation. That is why facts alone cannot free us. We have to face and heal the feelings that seem true but are not. The quiet beliefs and reactions that live just below awareness. They hide in the everyday things we do not question. A quick judgment, a familiar resentment, a story we tell ourselves about what someone meant. Each time we notice one of those patterns and call it by name, a little more light gets in. Because deception does not only work in grand lies, it thrives in the small, unchecked emotions that shape how we see things. Clarity begins the moment we stop letting those feelings fly under the radar. When we try to reason with deception, we step into its field. A field already tilted in deception's favor. It invites debate, not to be understood, but to drain our focus. Every time you argue with what is false, you feed it attention. And attention is its currency. Deception is not looking for resolution. It is looking for reaction. It survives by keeping you tangled in explanation and defense. That is why truth feels quieter. It does not compete. Truth does not need to win the argument. It only needs to be stood in. The moment you stop chasing deception for proof, its structure starts to collapse. Because the game cannot continue once you step off its board. The danger is time. We only get 24 hours in a day and only so much life to spend. Every minute spent wrestling a lie is a minute stolen from what is real. Deception feeds on attention. Truth grows in stillness. When we give our focus to what is not, We pour energy into a shadow. We come away tired, confused, and emptier than before because we have been working to hold up something that never existed. That is the quiet tragedy of deception. It doesn't just distort truth, it wastes life. That is how truth wins. Not by argument, but by where we choose to spend our hours. Each time we turn our attention back to what we can love, what we can build, what we can heal, we reclaim a piece of our time, a piece of our spirit, and we return to the only realm that truly exists. What is? Not the story, not the illusion, not the projection, but what stands real before us. Because life can only be lived here, not in the figment of imagination. This is where clarity becomes more powerful than comprehension. Because comprehension tries to make sense of the lie. Clarity simply recognizes it for what it is. I do not need to understand why water is wet. I could spend the rest of my life trying to explain it. Sit with the best professors, the finest scientists, look at diagrams and listen to theories until the mind is dizzy. But none of it changes the simple truth that water is wet. Clarity accepts what is. Comprehension wants to take it apart. And when we keep taking things apart, we risk losing the simple awareness that truth is not something to be dissected. It is something to be stood in. Clarity does not argue, because deception feeds on arguments. Clarity does not bargain, because deception was never offered in good faith. Clarity stands. And that standing isn't weakness, it is power. It is the quiet courage to stay aligned while the noise tries to pull you off balance. It is refusing to play a game that was rigged from the start. It is choosing truth, not the version that needs defending, but the kind that simply is. Because real truth doesn't demand agreement. It just keeps standing long after the argument has faded. So why argue in the first place? Because the mind mistakes argument for control. We argue to prove we are right, to feel seen, to settle the discomfort of not knowing. But every time we do, we step away from the quiet knowing that does not need proof. Clarity does not argue because it doesn't have to. It already is. Argument belongs in the realm of uncertainty. Clarity lives in the realm of truth. And once you are standing there, you realize the energy you used to spend convincing others is better spent living what you already know. We ask, how do I know the truth? The truth does not shout. The truth does not perform. The truth is steady. It carries weight. Truth leaves you with clarity, not confusion. Even when the facts are incomplete, truth has a way of settling inside you, like a stone dropped in still water. Lies, on the other hand, create agitation. They pull you into urgency, into chaos, into reaction. The truth withstands questions. It does not need manipulation to survive. It holds. It simply is. That is why discernment isn't about having perfect information. It is about learning to listen beneath the noise, to sense the difference between the energy of what is real and the performance of what is not. The truth, like water, does not need an explanation to be known. You do not have to analyze wetness to feel it. You only need to touch it and know. That is how truth works. Quietly self-evident. Deception, on the other hand, needs performance to survive. It must persuade, dramatize, and demand your belief. Discernment lives in that quiet knowing. When something is true, it doesn't need to convince you. It simply is. One of the great confusions of our time is that people mistake their perception for truth. What I feel in a moment may be real to me, but that does not mean it is the whole truth. Reality has layers: personal, collective, universal. And most of us live inside the personal one, believing it is the only sky there is. That is why it is possible for several people to look at the same event and see completely different things. Each is filtering through their own history, their own emotion, and their own belief. Their personal truth. But what is true? What exists beyond opinion? What exists beyond reaction or preference? What does not shift when we do? The truth isn't mine or yours. It is what stands when everything personal has been cleared away. That is where clarity lives. And it is why discernment matters so deeply. Because without it, we end up defending what we feel instead of recognizing what is. There is another kind of deception that is harder to spot, because it doesn't come through a headline, a rumor, or a screen. It doesn't shout, and it doesn't need an audience. It comes quietly, as worry, as fear, as what if. It sneaks in wearing the mask of concern. It sounds reasonable, even responsible. It whispers, "I am just thinking ahead." But what it is really doing is stealing peace, one anxious thought at a time. Fear is one of deception's oldest disguises. It does not attack head-on. It seeps in. It knows that if it can hook your imagination, it can make you live in futures that have not happened. and mourn losses that have never occurred. That is how deception evolves from something external we can point to into something internal that feels like our own voice. Someone you love walks out the door, and without warning, the mind starts to play a movie that has not happened. Oh my gosh, what if something goes wrong? What if they never come back? The body tightens, the breath shortens. 1,000 scenarios build themselves in seconds. What started as love quietly shifts into fear. And before you know it, you are no longer standing in the moment. You are living in an imagined future that has already gone wrong. The mind thinks it's protecting you, but really, it is pulling you out of life itself. You are in the house, but your spirit is pacing up and down outside in the road. And that is the hidden cruelty of this kind of deception. It doesn't come to destroy your love. It comes to use it against you. These fears are not your intuition. They are intrusions, deliberate disruptions of your clarity. Their goal is to use your love and twist it into fear, keeping you frozen, your heart racing, your breath shallow, standing at the edge of life as if something terrible has already happened. That is how deception wins, not by force, but by paralysis. Before you can stand firm, you must see the lie for what it is. You cannot stand against what you are still confusing as truth. Know that there is a difference between what is, what may be, and what is not. What is stands steady. It can be examined, tested, lived. What may be belongs to possibility. It deserves preparation, but not fear. What is not is the shadow, the false story, the imagined disaster, the lie pretending to be prophecy. And when you know the difference, your ground becomes solid. That is when standing firm has power. Standing firm is not surrender. It is stepping forward and writing the script yourself. It is the moment you rise, call deception by its name, and own your authorship. It is the reclaiming of your breath, your presence, your right to live in what is, not what if. Fear does not own the future. It only survives on the ground you give it. When you stop flinching at its shadows, when you can look it straight in the eye and say, yes, life is uncertain. Yes, anything can happen. But even so, you will not control me. Its power breaks. And not because fear disappears, but because it no longer decides who you are. We need to talk about what spiritual attack really looks like. For too long, people have imagined it as something out there. Someone stirring a pot, muttering a curse, or working some midnight magic in the dark. But most of the time, it doesn't come from out there at all. It comes from within, from the thoughts that whisper defeat, the memories that reopen wounds, the fears that replay like broken records until we start believing them. It is the deceptions that slip in unseen, the ones that convince you you are not enough, the ones that twist love into worry and dress control up as care. These are the real attacks: quiet, persuasive, believable. They do not need candles or rituals. They only need your agreement. It is the deceptions that grow and feed, not because they are strong, but because we keep giving them our attention. They feed on focus, on repetition, on reaction. Every time we replay the same fearful thought, every time we defend a false story or revisit an old wound, we become both the soil and the water for its survival. Deception does not need your faith, only your focus. The more you feed it, the more it grows. The moment you stop feeding it, it starts to starve. But the real battleground is the mind. It slips in like a thought. It sounds like your voice. It masquerades as reason, as intuition, as just being cautious. But what it really wants is control. Control of your focus, your mood, your choices. It doesn't need to shout. It just needs to sound reasonable enough. Just reasonable enough that you do not question it. That is how the mind becomes the stage and deception the quiet director behind the scenes. But here is the part few of us want to face. Deception always needs an accomplice, and too often that accomplice is us. It feeds our pride, our need to be right, our refusal to yield, our wrong and strong moments when humility feels like loss. Every time we cling to being right instead of being clear, or nurse resentment just to prove a point, we hand deception the microphone. And it uses us, our temper, our wounds, our willfulness. It uses all of this to keep destruction alive. Even when all we truly want is peace. And maybe this is what worship truly is. Not ritual, not performance, but surrender to the spirit of truth. When you finally see how easily the heart can be deceived, and yet how gently truth waits for your return, bowing becomes effortless. Not because you have been conquered, but because you have come home. Deception does not whisper politely. It storms the body. It hijacks your chemistry, floods the blood with stress, and convinces the heart that danger is permanent. This is not a metaphor. Fear left unchecked literally kills. It wears down the immune system, it steals our sleep and corrodes the mind's ability to rest. It is a virus, and once it infects, it ravishes. It spreads through thought and feeling, multiplying through every unguarded worry until clarity itself becomes fevered. That is the rudeness of deception. It barges in uninvited, and if you let it stay, it drains life from the inside out. Most people never see it for what it is. They call it stress. They call it caution. But the truth is, it is slow spiritual suffocation disguised as normal life. This is not superstition. This is strategy. This is how deception wages war. I have done my best. I will continue to do my best. And I accept fully that there are things in this life beyond my control. I refuse to live bowed beneath that truth. I will not let what I cannot control silence what I can. I will keep showing up. I will keep standing. I will keep living. Because deception thrives in confusion, but clarity is its undoing. You do not have to fight on its terms. You do not have to match its darkness with force. You only need to hold your ground in the light. And when you do, something shifts. The storm, no matter how loud, can only rage for so long. Truth does not need to shout. It simply outlasts the lie. Some storms are just not meant to be reasoned with. They are meant to be outstood. And those who stand calmly, clearly, without apology, become the still point the storm cannot shake. Remember this: storms are not meant to own you. Deception has power only when you let it own you. So, stand firm. This is reflecting on divinity, where we name the lie, stand in the light, and outlast the storm.